I'm Lauren Ashford, 36 years old. I used to think that if I did good work, someone would remember my name when it truly mattered. But then I opened a PDF and saw the faint italic line at the bottom. Lauren Ashford's participation has been reassigned to executive proxy. No one asked if I agreed, and I understood silence doesn't shield you from being erased. It just makes it easier for them to do it. I used to believe that if I kept my head down, the system would eventually notice. The coffee maker clicked behind me. I didn't turn around. My name wasn't there, not on the email, not in the PDF attachment, not even in the courtesy copy. The file was labeled Equity Adjustment Meeting. Confirmed participants. I opened it without expecting anything unusual. It listed the names of everyone I'd onboarded with everyone I'd coached through Q3 losses, everyone who used to ask me what to say on client calls. Their names were bolded. Mine was not included. Near the bottom of the page, under a faint watermark, a line read, Lauren Ashford's participation has been reassigned to executive proxy. No personal attendance required. I reread it. Once. Then again. The cursor blinked beside the document name as if it were waiting for my response. I had none. My coffee had started to stain the sleeve of my sweater. I hadn't noticed the spill when I lifted the mug. The cuff was damp, warm, fading darker by the second, slow and steady, like the change that goes unseen until it's permanent. I pressed it lightly against my desk blotter. The mark it left was almost identical to the one from last week. I clicked back into my project window, campaign data, client, churn revised talking points. None of it mattered now. My access would remain probably. But access isn't presence. A soft buzz. A message preview slid up from the bottom corner. Dan Murphy. Hey, heard you weren't on the list. You okay? I didn't answer. Behind me, someone laughed too loudly in the hallway. I recognized the voice. Tom Granger. I caught only pieces she'll be fine, and executive proxy just streamlines the process. Last month he'd asked me to rewrite his entire presentation at midnight, and never said thank you. I remembered the way he'd dropped the papers on my desk, resting one hand on the back of my chair, like he owned it. Like I was furniture. Like I should be grateful to be part of the room, even if I never spoke. My hands didn't shake. I adjusted the crease in the paper where I'd wiped my sleeve. I reached for a pen, not to write anything, just to hold. Someone once told me silence can't be misquoted. They were wrong. It gets edited instead. I closed the email. Not deleted. Just closed, and sat without moving, without checking the time, as if stillness itself might protect what was left. Because if they were rewriting the room, I wasn't in the footnotes. I'd been removed from the index. I thought consistency would earn me a place. There was a time I believed the first person in the building was the one who mattered most. I used to keep the same cardigan draped over the back of my chair, grey, with the elbows thinning out. No one ever moved it, not because they respected the space, but because they didn't notice. It was mine. I kept a pack of gum in my drawer, the kind my mother used to chew when driving home after long shifts. Wintermint. I'd take one before every late meeting, not for the flavour, but because it made me feel steady. Tom once waved at me across the conference table and said, "You're always here, Lauren. Solid. Dependable." He said it like it was a feature on a printer. When my mother was hospitalized for 5 days, I didn't tell anyone. I adjusted my hours, used my lunch breaks to call nurses, left voicemail updates that began with, "Just checking." No one noticed the difference in my arrival time. Or maybe they did. and decided it didn't matter. After the last client rollout, I asked for a private meeting. Tom opened the door without standing. His screen still glowed behind him. I showed him a draft outlining a new method for assigning campaigns rotational instead of political. I spoke calmly. He skimmed the first paragraph, then leaned back and folded his arms. If you want influence, Lauren, you should learn to blend in first, fit the room. Then maybe the room will fit you. I folded the paper and placed it back in my folder. He didn't ask to keep it. My desk phone rang while I was still standing. I remember the blinking red light, waiting to be noticed. It kept blinking after I left the room. People often left meetings with jokes or loud recaps. I left with marked-up printouts and a pen that wasn't mine. Dan once told me, they trust you with the cleanup because you don't make noise. Trust wasn't the word for it, but I nodded anyway. I kept showing up, even when the projects got passed around and somehow lost my name. Even when the cupcakes at the team lunch didn't include the one flavor I always brought to potlucks. Even when the annual awards were given to people who read from my slides. I didn't stop showing up because I gave up. I stopped because I realized no one had been looking in my direction to begin with. I learned early that names meant more when they were spoken aloud. The company birthday board had a balloon graphic next to each name. Mine was written in pen, not print. Not even ink, ballpoint faint and slightly smudged. A card had been left on my desk that morning. White envelope. No name. Inside, thanks for all you do. The handwriting didn't match anyone in my department. At the annual kickoff, Tom called Scott Ramsey to the front. The applause was generous. Scott took the lead on the Midwood recovery, he said, raising his glass. I had spent 16 nights revising the segmentation model that turned that campaign around. I still had the call logs saved. Scott smiled like he believed it, like he was relieved not to have to explain. Once I was invited to a client pitch meeting. It was meant to be collaborative. I spoke for 2 minutes, just enough to introduce a framework, before Darren leaned over my slide and started clarifying. I folded my notes. No one asked why I didn't speak again. The suit jacket I wore that day still hangs in my closet. There's a small pull at the cuff from where I gripped it too hard. I haven't repaired it. It reminds me not to rehearse what won't be heard. Later that quarter, I opened a shared drive to pull a monthly report. My name was listed under final formatting, not insights, not analysis. I checked the version history. I had created the original file. The metadata didn't lie. People just stopped looking. During a team lunch, someone passed out small thank you tokens, custom keychains shaped like the company logo. Mine had the wrong initials. I once brought my niece to the office for Take Your Family to Work Day. She asked why none of the posters had my picture. I told her I liked being behind the scenes. She nodded the way children do when they sense a lie too large to fix. At the last all hands, they played a highlight reel. A reel of wins. My work made it to 3 slides. My name didn't. I stopped sending reminders about proper credit. I stopped asking if it was an oversight. People don't misplace things that matter to them. They don't forget names they mean to remember. And I wasn't invisible by chance. I just didn't take up the kind of space they believed deserved a name. I used to believe preparation could protect me. The folder was smooth from use. I had printed every chart in color, tabbed the sections, rehearsed the numbers, until they sounded natural in my mouth. The pen I brought had a gold clip and ran out halfway through the first draft. I kept it anyway, a small illusion of polish. Tom didn't stand when I entered. His chair tilted just enough to imply comfort. His screen stayed on. I laid the packet on the table and waited. He glanced once, exhaled through his nose. 5%. He leaned back, one eyebrow raised. If you want more money, go work somewhere else. The laugh that followed wasn't loud. It was short and round-edged, like the sound someone makes when they think you've missed the point of your own story. I adjusted the sleeves of my blazer, though they didn't need straightening. Thank you for your time. The handle of the conference room door left a faint print on my palm. I kept pressing it as I walked back to my desk, like it might fade slower that way. The mug on my desk still had this morning's coffee inside. The surface had stilled completely, catching the reflection of a sticky note I'd written the week before, midward retargeting logic. Finalize by Thursday. I folded the note and dropped it in the drawer. No one looked up as I passed. A voice down the hall joked about over-eager requests. I didn't check whose. Once my mother told me some things are too quiet to notice until they break. She meant the water pipes in our first apartment, but I thought about that line while I sat down and opened my inbox again. Tom had assigned a new round of revisions. No greeting, just a subject line. Need this turned ASAP. You're the only one I trust to clean it up. I clicked the file, though I already knew what it would be. Dan walked past my desk and gave a casual two-finger wave. Rough meeting, he said without stopping. I nodded, even though I hadn't told anyone I had one. The chair under me creaked faintly as I leaned forward. I placed the gold-clip pen beside the keyboard, then pushed it gently out of line with the desk edge. It stayed that way. I didn't throw anything. I didn't cry. I didn't send a follow-up. There are moments where something doesn't fall apart, it simply detaches. Quietly, finally, and without permission. I never needed the last word. I only ever wanted space to finish a sentence. The message had been sitting in my inbox for 2 months. No subject line, just a single sentence. Let me know if you'd ever be open to a conversation. I had marked it unread the first time, unsure if curiosity counted as readiness. Her name was still there. Rachel Bennett, VP of Strategy. Different building, different city, different kind of silence. I typed 7 words and hit send. Hi, Rachel. I'd love to connect if you're still open. No greeting. No punctuation that apologized for existing. Her reply came 5 minutes later, tomorrow at noon. Looking forward to it. No one noticed the way I stood at my desk longer that morning. I used the last packet of sugar in the break room, the kind I used to save for Friday deadlines. I didn't replace it. Tom passed by with a takeaway cup in hand. Still here. Lauren, after all that fuss, he didn't wait for an answer. The handle of the fridge door clanged behind him. A drawer closed somewhere too hard. Someone laughed in a room that wasn't mine. I moved the worn leather pad on my desk half an inch to the right, aligned it with the seam of the keyboard, then left it there, imperfect, unfinished. Dan forwarded me a client brief at 9:16. Subject: Let's get this cleaned up. I opened it and worked like I always had. I corrected the phrasing on slide 3. I fixed the graph scale on slide 5. I didn't flag the mistake in his summary. I let it sit. At 11:50, I walked to the back office where no one ever ate lunch. The chairs were uneven, the blinds crooked. A box of expired granola bars sat in the corner, like they were waiting for someone to pretend they still tasted fine. My phone lit up at exactly noon. She didn't ask why I hadn't replied earlier. She didn't bring up my name like it was a favor. She said it plainly, like I had always belonged on the other side of the line, and was only now crossing back to claim it. I know what it's like to be overlooked. I know what it feels like when your work speaks louder than your presence. I didn't tell her what it had cost. I didn't say how many rooms I had tried to earn by sitting still. I just listened. Not everything needs to be corrected. Some things only need to be heard once to be understood forever. I didn't realize how loud constant urgency had been until it stopped. The door had no deadbolt, just a key with a worn plastic tag that read 5B in smudged blue ink. I turned it once then again out of habit. The floor tilted slightly to the left. Every step made the desk shift a fraction against the wall. There was no closet, just a hook with a splinter. I hung my jacket on it anyway. The kettle took longer than I expected. Not broken, just honest. I placed 3 tea bags beside it, spacing them like inventory. The mug had a chipped lip, smooth with use. Someone else had held it before me and made peace with the floor. I didn't add sugar. Outside the window, nothing moved except a line of pigeons on the rooftop across. They didn't look like they were waiting. My mother once told me, stillness is a choice, not a failure. She said it when I forgot to speak at the dinner table after my first review. I hadn't forgotten. I just knew nothing I said would change what had already been decided. I opened the small drawer on the desk and found a thumbtack. Just one. I pressed it into the corkboard I brought with me dead center. No papers, no goals, just the pin. The board leaned slightly on the nail, tilting left like the floor. The blanket on the bed smelled faintly of detergent, and something older like attic wood or gears left in sun. I folded it over the edge, then unfolded it again. I didn't know what felt correct. There were no meetings to prepare for, no documents waiting in a queue, no urgent follow-up marked in red. My phone stayed face down. No vibrations, no calendar reminders, no digital breath on my neck. I thought about logging into the shared drive, not to open anything, just to see if my name was still there. I didn't. A package had arrived that morning, inside a handwritten note. Welcome. Quiet hours begin at 9. Below that, a small envelope with a spare key. No signature. Just a name stamped faintly on the return label. Not mine. The board on the wall made a soft creak as the building settled. I didn't adjust it. Sometimes absence isn't a loss. It's the first place where the noise stops echoing. I used to believe that being wanted meant being valued. The subject line read, "Let's reconnect, exploring options." The sender was a new name, but the domain hadn't changed. Below it, another message appeared. This one, short. No greeting, no punctuation. We may have overreacted. Let's talk. We want to recognize your impact properly. I stared at the words until they lost shape. The mug beside me still had the price sticker on the bottom. I hadn't peeled it off. It sat clean on the windowsill, unshoosed. I had picked it up last week from a thrift store near the transit stop. White ceramic, no logo, slightly heavier than it looked. I had turned it in my hands 3 times before buying it. It reminded me of nothing. Laura messaged late that afternoon. Her tone was too careful to be casual. Clients threatening to pull out unless the woman who fixed Q4 is reinstated. They mean you don't. They... There was no question mark at the end, just the curve of resignation. They didn't miss me. They missed the cover I had provided, the fix, the finish, the buffer. Tom's last words to me before I left had been half swallowed between meetings. Hope you're not making this personal. I had nodded then. I didn't now. The kettle clicked once and stilled. I didn't pour the water. I left the tea bag dry on the counter. I opened the calendar app on my phone. No scheduled calls, no pre-reads, no red exclamation points, just an empty white square with a blinking cursor waiting for something to belong to it. I unlocked the message again, hovered over the reply button, then placed the phone face down. They hadn't overreacted. They had calculated. They had gambled on invisibility, and now that it cost them, they were trying to backfill presence with convenience. If they had sent that message 2 weeks earlier, it would have landed differently. But timing is a form of truth, and theirs had spoken. My thumb brushed the side of the mug. Smooth, unmarked. I didn't need to finish the tea to understand the taste I'd left behind. Some hands don't reach to pull you in. They reach to pull you back. I wasn't in that place anymore, not because I'd run from it, but because I had finally stopped answering the door. I stopped measuring my worth by how quickly I responded. The desk they gave me wasn't new. There was a faint scratch across the top that caught the edge of my sleeve if I leaned too far left. I didn't ask for a replacement. I covered it with a folded napkin and placed a smooth river stone on top, something I'd picked up years ago from a hiking trail I never meant to finish. I kept it because it didn't ask to be beautiful. It simply was. The window didn't open, but the light came through clear. I moved my chair a few inches each morning to catch it across my forearms. That was enough. I didn't stay late. I didn't flag emails at 11:47 p.m. I stopped adding exclamation points to soften my directives. I drank the full cup of tea before opening my inbox. Lexi knocked once on the side of my desk last week. Her voice didn't carry, but the hesitation did. She'd been cut off in a meeting again. I pulled her project summary back into the room. Not loudly. Just enough to make space. Let her finish. She knows the sequence better than I do. No one argued. They never did when tone stayed steady. A week later, a message blinked on my screen. Sarah Coleman. Subject, quick favor, if you have a sec. The body was short. No backstory. No nostalgia. They're cutting my team. No hard feelings if you can't, but if you hear of anything. I didn't reply right away. I forwarded her portfolio to design and left a note. Quietly. Brilliant. Worth your time. No one thanked me. That was fine. At home, the board above my desk had one note pinned in the corner. Build what didn't exist for you. I had written it without thinking on the back of a receipts envelope. The pen bled slightly through the paper. I left it like that. Last night my mother called after dinner. She mentioned a cousin's wedding and paused long enough for the implication to fill the silence. Don't make this about you, Lauren. It's just easier when you're not in the photo. I didn't answer. I adjusted the stone on my desk just slightly. My tea had gone lukewarm. I used to enter rooms hoping someone would pull out a chair. Now I look for those still standing, and I make sure they have somewhere to sit. That's enough for me. I no longer felt the need to respond just because someone addressed me by name. The envelope had no return address. The handwriting on the label looked rushed, almost mechanical. My name was spelled correctly. The company name below it was slightly smudged, as if someone had tried to cover it, but gave up halfway. It had been forwarded twice, first from the corporate mailroom, then from my old apartment. I opened it, without urgency, inside a revised equity agreement. A typed cover page said the new clause would take effect immediately upon signature. A line in bold. Claim shares will be forfeited if this document is not signed by the stated date. That date had already passed. There was no note, no explanation. No one had called. The form itself wasn't personal, but it had reached me anyway. I printed the page and placed it between two file folders on my desk, the kind with metal tabs that never quite aligned. I found a pen I hadn't used in weeks, blue ink, fading at the edge. I wrote one sentence across the margin. You don't need to worry about my shares. They were never yours to define. I folded it once then again. I didn't seal it. The stove in my kitchen hissed slightly when lit. I turned the burner low and held the paper over the flame. It curled quickly, the edges shrinking inward as if pulling itself away from me. I let the ash fall into the sink, grey and soft like lint from an old sweater. The towel I used to wipe my hands had my last name stitched into the corner, Ashford in pale blue thread. My mother had given it to me when I moved into my first place. At the time, she'd handed it to me with one line, "Don't leave things behind just because you can't carry them neatly." The towel had frayed since then. I kept it anyway. I didn't take a photo of the letter. I didn't back it up, didn't forward it to anyone. It existed for a moment, and then it didn't. That was enough. I spent the rest of the afternoon doing nothing in particular. No errands, no checklists, just space. I used to believe closure needed ceremony witnesses' final words, the right setting. But I've learned some endings don't require applause or silence. They just require permission. And this time, I gave it to myself. I no longer needed silence to feel safe. I chose it. The kettle clicked once, then stilled. I poured slowly, letting the steam rise before I reached for the mug, ceramic, sea blue, faint chip at the base. Lexi had left it on my desk with a note I never threw away. "You made room." "Thank you." I hadn't replied. I didn't need to. The cactus near the window had bloomed without warning. A single white flower, small and certain, curling at the edges like it wasn't afraid of being unnoticed. I hadn't watered it in a week. The mentor packet sat unopened beside a pen I hadn't used since Wednesday. I left it like that. I traced a faint crack on the windowsill with the tip of my thumb. It ran just short of the edge, never splitting through. Some things stop breaking on their own. My mother's voice echoed in the back of my head from long ago. Don't expect people to make room for what they don't understand. I used to think that meant I should shrink. Now I understood it meant I should stop waiting. I opened the window. Not for air. Not for ceremony. Just because I could. The paper on my corkboard fluttered slightly in the shift. One pinned note handwritten in blue. Not everything needs to be proven. Some things just are. I didn't read it twice. I already believed it.